I just want to say up front today, these we do this topic. I'd much rather talk to somebody on the phone or do a meeting like this, because if you put something out in print, you don't have the full context, and sometimes people bristle up. If you're the landlord, you want what? Show me the money, right? Yeah, show me the money. If you're the tenant farmer, what do you want?
Good land.
Good land. I want a reasonable price, right? And we're kind of talk about some things today. I mean, just things that. What's that?
I want free breakfast.
Free breakfast? Oh, okay, we got the free breakfast today, so we're there. All right, so that's good. So anyway, yeah, so we're our role is I just want to make it clear, Courtney and Kathryn and our role is really very much to be here and be supportive, no matter which side of that fence. Maybe there's even multiple other sides of the fence, and probably some people do all the above, but we just want to, just help people. A couple of things like we see sometimes. I'll get a call, seems like every year there'll be one or two. My cash rents never went up for 20 years and it's still at this level. And I know it's real low. The person calling me knows it's real low. I'm sure the tenant knows it's real low, but how do you work with that? And those are always hard. Those are difficult. Is it really right to fix that in 1 year? Probably not. I mean, how do we handle these things when these things happen? Things like, what rights do you have to know as a landlord, or what do you have to do as a tenant? I mean, all these things. That's why there is no single cash rent. That's some of the things we're going to talk about today and have some introductory things. Kathryn Jennings, she is our Purdue Extension Educator here in Elkhart County that does livestock focus things. So she's here to kind of talk a little bit about the pasture part. Courtney's going to talk to Schmidt from Miami County, right?
Yeah.
Making sure I had the right county there. She is going to be talking to us with the PowerPoint that you got handed out. I also have here some crop budgets, which I'll pass. I'll just start those both directions. Sorry, I didn't get those out to you yet. That's from the Penny Purdue. So it's a corn budget, the soybean budget. You might be saying, why are you giving me that? I'm a landlord. Well, I think it's good for you to understand what your tenant's dealing with, price-wise and things. So those are some numbers that the Penny Purdue had for corn and beans. So I'm going to pass those around. So with that, I'm going to, unless somebody has a question or something before we get started, or something you want to make sure we cover, we'll let Courtney take off with her PowerPoint to get some thoughts going. Kathryn's got some things to talk about, I think, and then we'll kind of do some Q&A and discussion if that works for everybody. All right. Everybody good? All right. I think they're full of biscuits and gravy, so I think we're okay.
Okay. Well, now it's nap time, huh? I am Courtney Schmidt, like Mark said, and I'm an Ag and Natural Resources and Health and Human Sciences Extension Educator in Miami County, originally from Clay County. So the stuff I talk about is best practices, but I come from a 5th generation corn and soybean farm. And everything I talk about in this land leasing thing is like the opposite of what my family actually does. So our first piece of advice that the land lease team always gives about land leases is to put it in writing. Put a lease in writing, put your agreement in writing. My family doesn't have any of our land leases in writing, but it is a good practice. It helps encourage discussion. Sometimes you may have ideas of what you'd like to happen and it doesn't happen, but you've never talked about it. So it does help you sit down and kind of get your expectations out there. My family has had the same landlords for multiple generations. I think we're kind of a rare situation nowadays. That doesn't happen much anymore, but our landlords were at my wedding. We are not family, but almost family. However, I don't even know my grandparents, I know my grandparents' level of the generation of landlords, but I kind of barely know their kids, no idea about the grandkids. So it was okay to not have leases in writing with that one generation because you're basically family. You see each other all the time, you have a good relationship, good communication. But now when we're getting down to the generations below, we start losing that connection, and people may have completely different priorities that we don't even realize about. So getting that in writing, obviously it helps with rights and your obligations, and then it also develops a guide for your successors and your heirs to know what you were doing before. So going into the types of land leases, I know I heard a couple farmers in here, so this is going to be pretty basic for you, but all the landlords, there's three general types. There's cash rent leases, crop share leases, and then flex cash leases. Does anybody I really can't, I can see the room, but I can't see hands to see who does a cash rent. If you can raise your hand, cash rent leases.
Looks like about 9 or 10 are the majority are by far cash leases.
Okay. That's what I figured. That's the most common one nowadays, I think. Crop share is what my family still does. So I'll talk about that first. Crop share is usually 1/3, 2/3, or 50-50. So in a 1/3, 2/3 share situation, the landowner is getting 1/3 of the profits from the crop. And then usually they just pay the land ownership costs only. 2/3 of the profit goes straight to the farmer, but they take on a lot of the input costs then. The owner is not dealing with a lot of the input costs. That's on the farmer. They're just getting 1/3 of the profit. In a 50-50 crop share, the owner will take on the chemicals, the fertilizer, crop insurance costs, and all of the landowner costs. So the advantages of a crop share lease is that the owner of the land could have some more input in the management. You share, it's more of a shared, you share the risk a little bit more. You share profits, obviously. The tenant for the farmer, they could have lower input costs. The disadvantages of that crop share lease for the landowner, your profits are very variable. So depending on what stage you are in life or what your situation is, you may want to know what your income is going to be every year. So a crop share lease is not going to be what you want because that could vary drastically year to year. It does increase your bookkeeping. If you're doing the shared expenses, it does increase that. You have to pay attention more to the management of the land and the costs of the land. So the next type, and probably most common, is the cash rent. And it's just simple. It's fixed. If you're on a fixed income as a landowner, you probably just want that cash rent so you know exactly what your income's going to be. It's not going to fluctuate with crop prices or input prices. It's one set price every year. So simple. The third type is flex cash lease, and it's probably a lot more complicated. So your base rent is set lower than what your cash rent would be. And then you put in points to where you could get a bonus every year. If, for instance, it's a bumper crop year, and prices skyrocket, if you don't have this flex cash lease as a landowner, you don't get to benefit from those high crop prices. You get your set base price. If you have a flex lease, then you do get to share in that benefit, that additional profit. Most of you guys are doing are landowners, so there's programs if there's interest in the flex lease type of lease. Mark can have people from the land lease team come and give a very detailed program over flex leases. They're very fair. They're probably the most fair way to do a land lease. It's just gets way more complicated in the bookkeeping and record keeping and watching for your government programs and what triggers that bonus payment. So really it depends what kind of lease you have, depends on a lot of things, but it can boil down to how much risk are you willing to take as the landowner and the tenant operator. This graph here kind of gives you a visual of what your risk and financial returns are by the lease type. So that horizontal axis is your risk. The vertical axis is what your profits usually are. And the red is for the landowner and the blue is for the farmer. So if you look at crop share for the landowner, that's your highest risk, but also your highest chance for profit. If you look as the landowner, your lowest risk, if you are not willing to have a variable income every year, your lowest risk is that cash rent lease. But it also could be your lowest profit year. Though this year with prices, if you're going to talk about wanting to change your cash rent, and I know Mark talked about that, and people haven't looked at their cash rents for a while and noticed that they're low. This year's probably not going to be the year to talk to your farmer about raising the cash rent. I don't know if people paid attention this year, but input costs just keep on rising and our prices are not great. Also with the soybeans not being bought by China, it's going to be a problem. So I wouldn't pick this year to talk to your farmer about raising your cash rent. But we're going to get into if you do want to talk about raising that rent. Mark, do you have anything right now?
One of the things I was just going to say, personal situation for me, which I don't want, I don't think anybody wants to be sharing their actual numbers and things probably too much, but I had a situation where the ground had been conventional tilled for many years. We was wanting to move it to a no-till situation. And so the flex lease, we were changing tenants because the previous tenant did not want to, didn't do no-till, had no interest in that. And we was wanting to move towards no-till, doing cover crops. But as most of you know, the first year or two when you're doing that transition, you can take a clobber. Kind of can be tough. We got Mr. No-till in the room right here, but but over long term, it's a great thing. And that flex lease, it turned out being beautiful for us. We actually got more than we would have been getting because we had decent years and left that base price kind of where it was at. But if things went well, there's good opportunity. And there's a lot of issues. The tile drainage isn't good. There's things like that. But actually, I think both sides are happy. There was some protection in case something went awry. We took some risks, but at the end of the day, we were rewarded. So if you're making a big change like that, I think the flex lease can be a good way to get two parties to a common goal, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Courtney, is that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there
I
might
think
be factors and things you have too, whether it's like, that might come into play if you're trying to do an investment for tile drainage or something like that. I think all those things, it's a tool to help you get to where you want to get to. So nobody's taking a clobber. Hopefully nobody's taking a clobber for a couple of years.
And if you're a landowner that's really interested in the management of the land and wants to be really involved, flex leases are a good way to get involved and learn more and stay on top of what's going on.
So Courtney, I think you're going to talk about this some, but if I just have a cash rent situation, and we look at this Purdue Ag Econ report, and at the end, I'll probably talk about how to use and not use the Purdue Ag Econ report, and you may more or less cover that with your slides that I saw. But I think one of the things I think we all see a lot is someone that does cash rent. What information do you have, and what information do you need to really know if your cash rent is in the right spot or not? I mean, I find a lot of tenants have no idea what their yields have been on their ground, and that seems like a fair request of information. We got two farmers in the room. Do you guys bristle if somebody asks you what the yield was on the ground that you're farming?
Owner asks.
If the owner asks you what
You have
no problem. You have any problem with that? I mean, so we have two farmers. Sometimes tenants will. I'm sorry, landlords. Excuse me. Landlords say, "I don't want to ask that. I might offend them." No. I mean, I think that's a fair question, and you have the right to know. And I would argue that really should be in the lease, the written lease. I mean, that is an expectation. Now, if you can't trust your landlord, if you can't trust your tenant to tell you the correct number, then you got other problems. But I think that's a fair statement. Yeah.
I think most of the time, I don't know about you, but if I would be asked that, and then some of the land that would be of lower productivity, I think possibly the landowner would be offended by knowing that some of his land was of lower productive capability. I think the offensive would maybe be the other way.
The other way. Yeah, okay. I just have had people like say, I don't know that I want to ask them that. I'm not sure how they would feel about it. I've heard people say that, but that's a good point. I mean, but I think the point you bring up there, it's like, oh my goodness, why is that area yielding so bad? Well, there's probably some good reasons for it, and you probably know the answers to that. Your landlord may not know that, so help inform that. And how can we address that? And again, maybe that flex lease is an avenue to get there to address those areas there. And the other thing is we all know that a tree, but probably most of us know, along the tree lines, nothing grows good there anyway. One thing we might want to talk about a little bit too is how to do conservation practices and how we work out the payment arrangements for those things when and maintenance and that type of thing along field borders where maybe productivity is low because it's a woods or what have you, and how those areas can be managed and what does that mean for wildlife and things. So anyway, those are some things I think all can kind of come to play here and help out.
All those things are reasons why you want to put your lease in writing too. Worrying about soil health, because sometimes if you just have a cash rent agreement, the farmer could just come in and farm that and not care about what they're putting into the soil because they're not interested in the long term. So putting stuff like that, conservation and soil health provisions in a lease agreement, is something that you can do. That's this slide here showing the different components of a good lease agreement, which you guys have these slides, so I won't go over each one of those. It's pretty obvious what each one of those are. One thing I would say is the renewal terms. If you just have a oral agreement, what's your when do you notify them of if you decide you want to move on to another tenant? What's the rules on that? Well, if it's not written, my slide doesn't want to advance. There we go. If it's not specified in the lease, there is a generally accepted practice for that. So the end of the lease year is likely to be your last day of February. And you have to give 3 months advanced notice before the term is up, before you decide to end a lease. So usually with no specified time frame, no written lease, you're going to want to deliver notice before December 1st of the prior year. That's a common question that we get, so I thought I would throw that in there. But if you do have the term specified in the lease, no notice may be required unless the lease says you require that.
And that's Indiana state law, correct?
Yeah.
I don't know if we have any Michiganders or anybody that farms in Michigan here, but that might be different if you cross the state line. So, and I do not know what Michigan is, but that might be something to check out.
And Jerry Harrison has a pretty good publication, Mark. I don't know if you have seen that, but I can send the link to you. I think it's still pretty accurate in case somebody wants it. So there's lots of factors that can affect your cash rental rate. I know Mark's talked about how do you go about discussing increasing your cash rent price with your farmer. Well, before you just say, I want to increase the cash rent, think about all the factors that go into what could set that price. So obviously yield, how good is that ground? What's the yield? What's the soil quality like? How big is the farm? How hard is it to get to? Are there a lot of trees around it? Is it an odd shaped field? How has the soil been used in the past? Has it been taken care of? Has it been put into another use prior that would affect yields or make it harder to farm? Reputation of the landowner, operator, both reputations. So you could develop a reputation as a really hard to please landowner, and you're going to have higher rental rates after a while if farmers get to know that you're a real pain to farm for. And then the operator obviously has a reputation as well. So you could people drive by your fields and you see trash and weeds and everything. You're going to get a reputation as that kind of farmer who doesn't pay close attention to their field management. So reputation's a big factor when you're developing your cash rent. What all services you're going to provide, like Mark talked about, doing cover cropping, and are you going to tile, all of that stuff, drainage, is it bottom ground, is it going to flood, that kind of thing. So one way to determine a cash rent that is kind of a base starting point to start the discussion is the market value, which we have a couple different resources out there that can give you a base to start talking about. And that's the Purdue Ag Econ Land Value Report that Mark talked about, which he may go over a little more later. But Purdue Ag Econ Department puts this out every year since 1974. And it's a document that's accepted by bankers, lawyers, accountants to get a good land value price. They survey land managers, auctioneers, ag lenders every year, real estate professionals, to get an average land value and cash rent cost across these regions. So on that map, they break it down by region. They don't go all the way to the county level. So Elkhart, I think you're in the north, right? Are you north or northeast? I'm not sure which side.
North.
North. Okay. So
North.
so you're up there in the north region. And then a second resource is the National Ag Statistics Survey. They do this biennially, but they survey farmers and ranchers. So you kind of got to think of your audience and who's being surveyed. If you're surveying farmers and ranchers, there's a chance they're going to underestimate their land values to the government, just quite honestly. Hopefully the Purdue Ag Econ with the land managers and the professionals, they're based on actual sales.
One thing, and again, I'll try to touch this later, but you had that slide you got up right now. If you go back to that previous one. So, I mean, as you kind of look at this, I'll look at this correctly whoops. You go back to that previous.
Oh, that one. Okay. Gotcha.
We sit right here and you see we're on a boundary. I just wanted to share, like, where I came from. I was here and we had some of the best farmland in the state up in here. We did not here. And I oftentimes say, I know we're in this area. This the survey. In fact, a site that's got a little webinar thing attached to it that I know Courtney's going to share later has some discussion on this. But honestly, unless you're in the very northern part, you were generally looking at here. I think the same's true here. If you got some of the sandier ground that's, you probably want to look at some of this area over here. But although this is kind of similar, that you got this area here, it's very different. So don't just get bound looking there. I think especially when you're on the line, look at a neighboring area. A lot of this northeast area is going to be those lake bed soils, high clay content, totally different than what. So it's, maybe here is the best, but we also have some counties up in here that are more similar to us. So I guess just don't let that line cause you to zero in too much on one area. So I just kind of wanted to point that out, if that makes sense, because I thought that was a good place to show that.
So this is where you can find that report. I always just Google Purdue Ag Econ land value when I need to look at it, but you can go to this website, that's the Commercial Center for Commercial Ag, Purdue's website. And you can find that publication on there, but you can find so much stuff at this website. There's a lot of decision tools, the crop budget spreadsheets, basis tool. If you have some time, I would check that out. There's all kinds of stuff there. That podcast area are the guys who did the survey, Purdue Ag Econ survey. They've got a podcast up talking about land values and cash rents for this year. They do that every year. So you want some good. There's also podcasts about flex leases up there. So if you're interested in learning more about more details about flex leases, you can find that at that website. But here's how it breaks down. This is the Purdue Ag Econ farmland survey, and it breaks it down into top, average, and poor land classes. And they base that on corn bushels per acre, which is why Mark's talking about you need to know what the yield is on your land, what the average yield is, because that's how it breaks down the value. If you look, this is the latest. So north area is up there, and your average ground at your corn bushel per acre average is 198 bushels an acre. If you look, which West Central is the red box, but we're looking at that top north area. If you look across there, your average cash rent per acre was $239 an acre in 2024. It looks like it jumped up to $247 in 2025. If you have top ground, you are looking at $313 an acre, and your poor averaging ground is $179 an acre. Did you want to go into anything on that, Mark?
No, I think we're good. We can keep moving. Does anybody have any questions? We can talk a little bit more about what that means. Yeah.
You can change your yield with greater input. I realize you have to start somewhere to have top average and poor land, but for me, as a farmer, I would consider top land as maybe land that would have a CEC of 20 in organic matter. Could it be classified as that rather than bushels per acre?
So, couple things here. These bushels per acre are not set by the survey people. When they send the questionnaire out, they ask, what is your top ground for your county or where you farm? These numbers, these averages, and Courtney, correct me if I'm wrong, but these averages are based, that's why they're not the same. That's why, no, there hasn't been someone on campus arbitrarily pick this number, depending on what area you're in. These are actual from the survey where people are asked what is high. And so, yes, I see what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense. But I mean, the survey, to keep comparing year over year, started in the 70s, I believe. I doubt that changes that much, but I do feel better about it in that these numbers are not the same every year. They also are based on how people report the averages for what they're reporting on, if that makes sense. Does that help any? Yeah.
Would fully tiled land raise that category class?
Question was, I'm sorry, the first question that if you didn't hear was feeling like the cation exchange capacity and organic matter levels ought to be used as the determination of top, average, and poor. And that was what I responded to. The next question here was, which because I want to repeat the questions, make sure those that are virtual can hear. The next question was, do implementing tile help improve these yields? And the answer to that's yes. And that's another factor. I mean, that again isn't separated out here. There have been some, I think Courtney has some slides come up with irrigation and non-irrigated, but those are using USDA numbers. Or the Purdue Ag Econ survey did not break out irrigated acres. But if I remember correctly, but anyway, the tile will definitely jump that up, and usually quickly. Has been, I mean, my experience of that I've heard and seen. So, but those are all. So that's why we can't just say this. Oh, here's your number. That's where you should be. Because all these factors, and you could have some really good, going back to the argument there about CEC and organic matter, you could have some really good ground in that factor, but if it doesn't have good drainage, you would still have some potential issue there. So there's a lot of factors involved, if that makes sense from my standpoint as a soils background person. But good questions, great questions.
And they use yield as to try and be like an ultimate equalizer of all those things. Because if you do those conservation practices or drainage tile, improve soil, that should improve your yield. So it's trying, using that yield number tries to make all of those factors, take all those factors into account and just, I mean, I think that's as close and as, best as you can get it's never going to be perfect, but
Yeah, one of the problems I have with that chart is, I have landowners that'll get that chart up and say, well, you should be paying at least this amount. And we're in the north part of the county here. I'm on sandy ground. Most of the ground we farm sandy along the toll road. And there's no way I can average 168 on that ground, but they look at that chart and say, well, you ought to be paying me 180 according to that chart. And I'll just use one farm for an example. There's a farm up there that I'm paying 150 for in that area. I'm in that area of the county. And the last 3 years, I haven't made any money on that farm. And I'm contemplating letting it go because, there's people who say in the city, they mentioned, she mentioned, this isn't a good year to raise the rent, which is true. The yields we're getting. But, I guess what I'm trying to say is these charts aren't, it doesn't tell the whole story, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so for those online that comment, these numbers don't tell the whole story. Farms a lot in the northern part of the county that's very sandy. No way in the world could pay 170, 179. That one actually went down slightly for the poor quality ground. And again, I think that's where this yield, I think the rebuttal back to that landlord that says you need to be paying more is it comes back to this yield. I mean,
yes, but I'm happy to tell my landlord to yield. I have no problem.
And that's where I think that information sharing and discussion is good, and having that's why we're doing this meeting today. Honestly, I mean, I'm glad some farmers are here, but a lot of the focus for this are for landlords, so that you understand. So I mean, and an average is an average. You may not have average, and you got to keep all these things in mind. I mean,
this particular
to get an average, you may have something here and you may have something here, but still all in this poor category ground. So
this farm was farmed 50-50 when these people inherited it. And after a couple of years of that, they said, well, we don't know what we're going to get each year, so we want cash rent. Well, the farm before me, he wouldn't do that. He would only go 50-50. And so that's how that all came about. But now we're in a situation now it's really not working.
Yeah. As a farmer, as a tenant, you got to at some point, I mean, it's like it's planting that area along the woods, and it's farming the very sandy ground or a floodplain that you only get a crop on at one out of every X number of years. At some point, when do I move on? I mean, everybody has to ask themselves that. I mean, that's kind of where you hate to, but that's kind of where you're at.
Oh, but something last year, they wanted to raise the last year, and last year we had no rain in August, and the beans were the size of BBs, and that took the profit right out of that. And so in this particular case, I put everything down on paper, every cost that I have, and every bit of the income, and to show exactly where I'm at on that. And I think it's kind of interesting to ask, what do the landowners think is fair? Say profit on a given farm is so many dollars, how much do they feel is fair for them, and how much for the tenant? We look at, that's why I really like it 50-50, and some of the land we rent is 50-50, and it works well. But most of those farms are always owned by retired farmers. And I don't want to make anybody unhappy here in the room, but retired farmers are my favorite people to rent from. And that's all because they know what we're up against.
Is everybody able to hear it's online, or do I need to repeat anything there or summarize?
No, that's coming in really clear, Mark. And I mean, you nailed it. Like, you've got to sit down and sometimes just educate those landowners and show them what you're up against. And we use this report, but I've never heard anybody from Purdue deliver this report and show this, at a presentation to landowners and say, this is the end all be all. It's always given with the caveat, there are different circumstances, and you've got to consider all the factors. This isn't just end all be all. This is a tool to start with. So I think like everything, it boils down to communication. And trying to educate and having farmer landlords, yes, they understand what you're up against. But sometimes you get those people that just inherit something and don't know anything, and you got to take the extra time to educate them and show them actually what's going on behind the scenes. Okay.
Let's get going.
Sorry.
Any other
for some
questions? Or is everybody good? Great questions.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so this chart's just showing your average for this year, 2025. The state overall average is $264 an acre, according to this this report. This is just breaking down those numbers that were already shown, and you've got that printout. So the National Ag Statistics Survey cash rent report can be found at this website under county estimates. So what's good about that is it breaks it down per county. And here's their numbers. So Elkhart at 201, that's the average on non-irrigated land. So 201, that's 2025. So if we go back, what were we at? We were at the North region average 247. The Purdue Ag Econ report was at 247 per acre. The NAS survey, 201. I think you can always almost always expect the NAS report to be lower than what the Purdue Ag Econ report is. Again, because it's a survey answered by farmers, and the other ones, sales.
There's probably a lot of reasons for that. Like if farmers are working more with family, maybe the cash rents aren't quite as high in some of those situations. That was something that's kind of been mentioned. There's, I do think there's been an effort to make sure that people that are doing Ag Econ survey are certainly actively involved with the sale of land. So, but those numbers, do tend to be a little higher than the other numbers. And there are some states, there's states that do this in different ways. I do think that Purdue's numbers tend to be a little more honed in than some of the other states when they get some really high numbers, because it's like, well, people tend to remember that sale that was super high, and that sticks in their mind. And so the process, I think, is pretty, because you're using appraisers and realtor type people that are bankers that are actually involved in those processes.
Yeah. I think this is interesting to see where the high and the low is. The high is usually always over there, Benton County, over on the west central area. Low, Ohio, down south there in the corner.
You mean there's actually farmable land in Ohio County? I'm just kidding.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know what they've got going on down there.
I'll watch this from there and I'll be in trouble. So
here's the irrigated from the NAS survey. So when you don't see numbers there, that's because they don't have any reporters there. And we don't have a whole lot of irrigation going on in Indiana. But I included this slide because Elkhart County did have some numbers. So you look at that, and it took quite a jump on the irrigated land, 281 versus 201. This is one tool I just wanted to throw in here because we have had, people tell us they don't know how to find their yield when they're the landowner. They don't know how to get their yield. They're kind of scared to ask the farmer. Here's one tool. You can go to the USDA Risk Management Agency and website, and it breaks it down by county yield there. So that's one jumping off point, and it's going to be just like that cash rent scenario though, because this is an average for the whole county. Well, Miami County, for instance, is super long and narrow. The south part of the county is completely different than the north part of the county. So it's hard to just say that's the average for a whole county, but that's a jumping off point. So we already talked about this. Like you were saying, the market approach, using these two reports as just your, hey, here's the cash rent because this is the average on this report, doesn't work. You've got to consider all the factors, which we've already discussed. This finally is a really awesome resource, I think, because you can listen to somebody blab on for forever and it won't sink in. You got to see this in writing. If you go to aglease101.org, this gives you publications that talk about flex leases, cash rent, and crop share, what all goes into it. And most importantly, it gives you example template leases of those three types that you can fill them in just like they are, or you can use that and modify it to make it what you want. So wanted everybody to know that tool is out there and helpful. It also has pasture leases. I know Kathryn is going to talk about, or maybe the livestock stuff. It has the pasture lease examples there as well. So that's my spiel.
Courtney, you're going to hang on for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll let Kathryn come up and share her information. Are you actually gonna have a PowerPoint on the screen here, or you?
No, I was just talking.
Kathryn's just gonna chat for a little bit. Okay, I'll leave your PowerPoint up, I'll leave your sharing up, Courtney. And then if somebody has a question, we can go back to something, and then Kathryn's gonna chat with you. I'll turn the light on so you can.
So the two of you that have the pasture lease or hay production, is it more of the people are putting the cattle out on forage, or are they baling, cutting and baling? So with that, usually what they're gonna end up looking at is the hay production. So they're gonna be basing off the yield, so how much of hay per ton they're getting off of that field. And then the gross revenue. So for example, in the papers I gave you, it kind of runs you through an example cost. So that's going to be different compared to them just putting cattle out on the pasture. With that, you'll be looking at, okay, how many cattle are they putting out on it? What the quality of land is. So if it could be, they're going to be comparing it to, so like if it could be crops versus putting it into low quality forage.
Where's that go?
So how exactly have you guys been working out your leases for hay production? Or do you guys have agreed with the farmer? You guys want to share? Because you have the hay production as well.
It's just, in with the regular,
Oh, so you have it
crop.
combined with the crop. Okay.
we aren't separate with that.
I know some people run it separate just depending on, the variable, like if it's a good year for hay production, if it's a bad year, but that works too. Do any of you guys do like cover crops on fields? Ones that are farming? Another side to that is having, so when you put the cover crop down, maybe even leasing that field out to somebody with cattle or sheep, just to get another source of revenue from it. Then you're getting free fertilizer when they're putting the cattle out on it, and then they're eating down that cover crop too, instead of having to work it down in the spring.
Yes, the fences would be available.
I know sheep production, we did that. We had a couple farms over in LaGrange County that did it. They just put up one or two wires around where they have the sheep and they stay within that boundary. So usually if the cattle or animals are used to it, they can do it. And it works really well because you'll even see once the animals have went through that field, they graze it down low So then in the spring, you don't have as much above ground to kind of work up. You have that fertilizer there. Sometimes the hoof, all that traffic in that spot kind of works up the ground a little bit too, especially if it's wet. So another thing to think about for that,
I don't want them in there when it's too wet. Yeah.
it depends on the
The
farmer.
ground.
Could do that.
To me, if it's a no-till field, it would be better aggregate stability.
Mhm.
It probably support the traffic a little better than if it's tilled, from that standpoint. And you are getting when you look at it from a soil health standpoint, that's, you're to maximize your, biology of that soil, that's gonna help with the manure aspect of that. So I think there's some potential there, and from a soil compaction standpoint, the ground is really wet, it don't compact that well. If it's really dry, it don't compact. It's when it's in that in-between state, and that's probably that would be the greatest hazard of compaction, is when it's almost dry enough, but not quite. And so, again, I think timing of the year and.
Plus the stocking rate impacts that a little bit. Like if you have a big group of animals just in that one field, then you have more risk. But if the stocking rate, like if it's just a small herd in 4 or 5 acre field, is not going to do too much damage, especially with them moving around. And if they rotate. If they have hens and they're moving around, which is what they did in that field in LaGrange County. They did just sections and they'll move them once they get grazed down low enough, just to keep it even.
Could you, could you relate to a share or portion? How would you sell a crop of hay? Like I would want to sell it for cash. My barns are full, so I can't store more hay. How would I go about that?
Most of the time when people are doing that, they're either selling directly, like they'll either go to some of the hay auctions, so that's a route they can take it to, or they're doing it privately where they're either putting it on social media. They have local farmers that they know have livestock and they'll sell them directly to them. That's how I go about it when I'm buying my own hay for livestock is, okay, there's a hay field down here. I figure out who the farmer is. Or for your instance, it'd be, you would know somebody that has livestock down the road. You ask them if they need any hay. Biggest thing is the auctions though. That's where everybody's commonly going. It's just, it's harder if it's only a few bales.
And then how would you determine the price? Half of the intended selling price in the winter, or?
It's, a lot of people go based off of what the average is. For that time of year, what the cutting is, the quality. It's nice when people are doing hay testing and they know what the quality of their hay is, because they can go based off of that. Like if it's a high quality hay, it has all the high quality proteins, up around like 16 to 20%, then they can sell it for what I think the high going price right now is like $8 a bale. So then comparing, let me see if I can pull it up. Let's see.
Well, all hay starts out as hay quality, but if the man buying the hay gets caught with some rain, then
then he's in trouble. That's for sure. Let's see.
We do have a forage probe here in the office if you wanted to borrow that and use it to do some forage testing. And there's some instructions for how to do that.
Okay. See if I can find it.
Yeah, I think I've been seeing like 8 or 9, like third cutting hay for 8 to 9, and it depends on the quantity too a little bit. But.
See, tons. Here's the average prices that they're going for. Again, it depends on how it's baled. Large bales versus kind of the small squares. A lot of that comes with the labor that goes into making the bales. So you have up here alfalfa grass mix. Average price was $210. For good versus good and premium. For just good, it was large square for $200, 200 for the large round as well. And then once you get down to kind of the utility, so the lower quality forage, you're getting down to 100 for the average price per ton.
There's no
And then
small
just the mixed
square,
grass.
there's no small square bills.
They're not showing that on,
Okay.
wait, let me see. Large square, or small square right here. So that was for wheat.
Oh, small.
You don't see as much. A lot of the bigger fields are going with just the large rounds and large squares. So it's harder to, if you would, let's see, I'm trying to think. Basically, if you would compare that, you would just divide it up by, well, I would think it'd be about 3 or 4.
So if you like a 50 or 60 pound bale,
Yeah.
be, and divide that out, and then to me, there'd be a premium for small bales, just because the hand.
Because those smaller farms, I mean, they're gonna be wanting the easier manageable bales, so the small squares. So you can sometimes get a better price for those depending on who you're selling to.
Sometimes, I'm gonna have a person that was kind of looking for some hay, because he has some people that bought from him regularly. He was actually baling some other people's hay, or getting some hay off other people, because he didn't want to lose his customers, because he had these long-term customers. So that's always a factor that's out there too. And because hay this has been dry. I mean, we haven't had a lot of hay this year as much as, and the weather's been actually pretty decent most of the time to get it cut, although some of this last cutting here, it just seemed like things never dried out. We had these really warm nights and really heavy dews, and it just would never dry out, and then lay there for a week, and then by that time it rained, and didn't we're in trouble. So
So then quality drops.
yeah.
Yeah, biggest factor this season. Another thing that can sometimes be used, I mean, I'm doubting that would be the situation for many of you here, but sometimes when it comes to like pasture or cover crop or land lease in general with livestock, sometimes people do the calf crop kind of agreement where, okay, we'll let you use this pasture if I get this portion of the calf crop. So they either get some of those calves to raise up themselves, or they just get some of the cash from the sale of those calves. That's another portion, another agreement that sometimes people have with these livestock producers. A little more hands-on, especially if you're not one to actually raise livestock, those calves that come from that, but is another consideration. I don't know.
Any other livestock related questions? I don't think that's a smaller number of you. And some of you might not have that, but you're like, that gets me thinking a little bit.
Because sometimes, I mean, it's beneficial where you might have a field where you're like, okay, let's put some forage on it for a year, give it a little bit of a break, and then till it up the next season. We have some farmers who will do that, and it seems to work for them, where they'll transition back and forth. And you can still get use out of it. So you'll just put animals on it or have somebody bale it up for hay.
Some landlords are real sensitive about, are they mining my soil? Are they lowering my soil fertility values of my field? And to me, there's a lot more. Yes, that's something to always be on top of a little bit if you're the landlord. But think about the other assets that was brought up earlier, the organic matter and cow exchange capacity. The tiling, you asked about tiling earlier, that's more of an immediate impact. Okay, we'll see yields bump quickly from that. It's a longer term thing when you start trying to increase organic matter. And I think, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds of soil science, but for a soil to be black in color, which I think we would all agree that's the best soil to have, right? For a soil to be black, it has to have 5% organic matter to be black. And that's something that, in soil science classes, we would say, well, you can't really change soil, you got what you got. I mean, you can compact it, you can do things that damages it, but you can't really change it. Well, one thing that's really true is there is a drastic change you can make, is you can change that organic matter number. A lot of us don't have black soils, we've got brown soils of some sort, they're gonna be 2-3% organic matter. Sometimes they're even, if we got some of these sandy soils, there might even be less than 1% organic matter. My point here is, like, if you did talk about some of these things Kathryn's talking about here with grazing, with cover crops, implementing forages in a rotation, maybe wheat once every 5 years, some things like that, that's going to really benefit your soil. There's a potential to build up to 0.1% every year or two of organic matter in your soil by doing no-till and cover crops. And I would argue incorporating wheat in your rotation once every 5 years. Your corn and soybean yields will be better in the following years after a wheat crop if you have it than if you don't have it. Sometimes you're like, well, I don't want, especially if you're doing a flex lease or, I don't want to do wheat because it'll be a down year for me. Well, it may or may not be, it depends. But don't just rule those things out, because those things are just as important to your soil as the fertility levels are. And they're like 0.1%. What's the big deal? Well, remember, 5% is black. So if I can move that needle from 2 to 3, I have fundamentally changed that soil. And that does not happen overnight. That's going to be over. How long have you no-till, Keith? You got fields the longest no-till field?
1973, I have a field I stopped tilling.
It hasn't been tilled since 1973. Organic matter levels in that field went from what to what?
I have a field at 4.9. I hope I can get to 5. Not everything is that high.
It didn't happen overnight, so that's why, from our family thing I shared earlier, I mean, that's kind of why we were doing that. So those are things to keep in mind. You got more livestock things to say, or was you kind of wrapped up, Kathryn?
I've wrapped up. I mean, even considering the benefits, like right now with cattle prices, I mean, there's always drawbacks, but also benefits. So don't count it out, I guess. Make use of the prices where they are.
One more question, if I could ask on related to my previous question. So if I would sell a crop of hay in the past, when I've sold it, I've kind of went 50-50. If I anticipated a winter price of hay at 200, then I would sell that crop of hay at 100. Is that fair?
That's fair, because even by the time we get later into the season, the price is going to be a lot higher by then. Like even looking right now with how everything was down south with production, prices are going to be extreme by the time we get to the winter. Plus, if you're selling right out of the field, I mean, there's a premium there too. Better than selling old hay. Some people were trying to sell old hay for $8 a bale. If the quality's good, you can sell it up for higher. So selling low quality hay for, that was from last year.
So much, how much does hay drop in value if it from like over time, even if it's kept dry and stored well? Really drop, and how much does it drop in value?
Usually, I wonder if I can pull up.
Oh, you don't have to be exact, just a rule of thumb, like, does it degrade in value 20% or?
Usually it's what, I think 15% is kind of the average drop in quality. Plus, I mean, the biggest impact is how it's stored time. I mean, even hay stored in a barn that's enclosed, the quality will still drop over time. If it's stored outdoors, if it has exposure to the elements like sun, it'll drop even faster.
So one of the things that I think's real sensitive on the cash rent, or I shouldn't say cash rent, on the rental, like tenant landlord relationships. If somebody, no matter what form you're using, but if somebody comes along and flashes the cash and, I'll give you more than what you're getting, and you've been, say, just using Keith here as an example, he's been no-tilling your field 10 years. What do we kind of know about a field that's, we're going to use hay as an example. A field's been hay for 5 years, and if someone comes in and tills that hay field, what kind of, do you really get good yields that first year after you till that hay? field, everybody's shaking their head, yes. You have built up a lot of nutrients there. When you incorporate the tillage, you incorporate the air, you get this massive flush release of nutrients. Man, you get sweet corn yields. Is that sustainable? Will you keep getting those yields like you do after that first year of after hay? No, it's gonna start ticking down. And as tenants, I beg you to think about this because I'm sorry, not tenants, as landlords, excuse me. As landlords, I beg you to keep this in mind. Just because somebody comes along and offers you more, some of these folks are sharp people. They know that if it's been no-till for 10, 15 years or more, it's sitting there just like a hayfield. It's not been tilled. You got all this, you've been built organic matter. You can come in, till that, and man, it's gonna release those nutrients. You're gonna get some great yields right off the bat that first year. But will you keep getting great yields like that over the long haul of 5, 10 years? No. It's gonna do the same thing as that hayfield. And I don't think, and if you're like, well, what are you talking about? It's a soil science thing, it's an agronomy thing, but I really, if that's something that you're like, I don't understand, or what are you saying? I'd be glad to talk with you about that on the side or something, but I just really want people to understand that because sometimes that's what happens. And it's unfortunate when it happens because at the end of the day, you're minimizing your land asset there because you're losing what's been built up. And I don't think people understand that. The quick money this year is not necessarily the game to play there. It's kind of like cutting a tree down and harvesting it at 18 inches when maybe the ideal harvesting size is 24 but you're wanting that cash right now, right? But if you keep putting that 1/8 of an inch ring around it every year, you're putting 1/8 of an inch around the bigger diameter. It's compounding quicker those last 10 years than it's the same thing. It really is. So I'm just kind of giving you some analogies there to think about because we should do a forestry one of these too another day this winter. But anyway,
I rented a farm that for 27 years and it had been a dairy farm up to that point. And the field closest to the barn got most of the manure. Because being able to get on it, sometimes it was a standard field. Anyway, that whole 27 years, that field was still better. That lasted that. It made a big difference, made a huge difference.
Dairy manure, especially depending on what they've been fed, can definitely have an impact. Like comparing, we had a discussion about this when we were down at Purdue at the ASREC. I mean, some of their swine manure they put on specific fields because it has the nutrients high in whatever they're needing and it has a great impact. And then the dairy manure they might put on a different field because it has the higher nutrients and whatever they're needing for that field. So, it can be used. There's a great impact for whatever field they're needing.
Well, one thing I want to say is, a good share of the landlords that I've dealt with have been great over the years. We've had really good relationships with most of them.
Talk a little more about the wheat once every 5 years.
Wheat is a grass, so it's got a lot of fibrous roots. I'll let some of my farmer friends in here jump in too if they want to have something else to add. But there's a lot of things. I think it's the biology, soil biology. You have a different crop here. I think that's why cover crops help soils too. You're actually adding to the biodiversity of that soil, feeding different microbes and different things. But that wheat crop does a couple things. It kind of allows you to get earlier cover crops so you can do some more there. We do, even though it's not, agronomically, most would say they don't recommend it, but we do have several people in the county that do double crop beans after wheat. It'll be interesting to see how some of these are coming along because some of them are looking halfway decent. The rains have just been timely this year. That's a little risky there, but anyway, and the one that we visited up northeast of here, he's like, yeah, I have to dry my wheat. I get my wheat out as soon, a stripper header, they can get it out early, but most people aren't going to spend that money or have that, different type of a header for the combine. But they have to, get that straw dried out and stuff and get it baled to get it off. And so, that's a market there, but you kind of, could lose that. But and I've also seen situations where people have an opportunity to, like, okay, if somebody's got dairy manure or manure, we'll just say manure, and they need straw, so they'll take the straw, but then they, put manure on your field. So there's a lot of things that you can play with there with your ground to get some soil biology cooking, especially if you're in a minimized tillage situation and trying to improve soil organic matter and cattle exchange capacity that we were talking about earlier. And so these are, the wheat just by itself, from what Sean Castile and oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on our corn specialist name, but Quinn, yeah, Dan Quinn. Thank you. Sorry. Both of them, I've heard them say, you put wheat in a rotation, you can just about always expect your corn and bean yields to be better the following years after. It's just, I think a lot of it has to do with, you're adding a fibrous root. It's just not, soybeans are kind of hard on ground. I mean, yes, they make nitrogen, so we think they're good, but they're a branch taproot plant. So they're kind of hard on soil to some extent. When you think of them that way, they're good because we can no-till them easier than we can corn usually and things like that. But from a soil building, soil health standpoint, soybeans tend to be a little harder. And, we think alfalfa is great. Alfalfa by itself can kind of be hard on soil. But if we have it mixed with a grass, mixed hay, orchard grass, and alfalfa go really well together. If it's red clover or probably smooth brome grass would be better paired with it, but you get the grass legume mix, again, going to be a better soil situation. You got me going. Sorry, I'm like agronomy stuff, but
Before I get my Cadillac right, I'd like someone to answer a question I've had for years. You mentioned about manure on the field, and someone else mentioned about building soil, organic matter. You can do that with manure, but I think we need to keep in mind that manure is something that came from the land to start with. Now, if you have a dairy, you are bringing inputs in, minerals and so forth. Some of those go through the cow. And if it's corn silage, you're bringing a tremendous amount of protein in. So if you factor that out, is there any difference in the soil building qualities? If I grow a cover crop after wheat, I can grow 6 feet of sudan grass and legumes and by harvest time, all that's gone. The worms and the biology have turned that back into crop nutrients. So is there any difference if I have a cold-blooded worm chew that fibrous material up and turn it back into organic matter and crop nutrients than if I have a cow do it and I haul it back out, the stinky stuff? Is there any difference between manure from a worm and from a warm-blooded cow?
I personally feel the cover crops alone. I don't feel you have to have the manure, but what I'm saying is it fits well to do what we're wanting to do, and we have a lot of it in this county, so that's why we talk about it.
I mean, it's gotta go
I'm
somewhere.
not saying you have to have manure to do what we're talking about. There's probably, there's a lot we don't know about soil biology. Holy cow, Purdue has a new soil biologist, and just the things that's been learned in the last 10 years and like organisms that we never even knew existed, it's exponential. It's mind boggling. And I was having trouble to keep up with the guy, but I will say there could be a possibility that, like, different manures might bring different biology to soils. So there could be some things there that would be at play. I don't know that, but I would argue there's things like, for example, certain cover crops are better at, they may not do it time after time, and that's a challenge here. But certain cover crops are better at reducing soybean cyst nematode, for example, if that's an issue for you. So, maybe certain manures might help build certain biology. So and we're getting a little away from the cash rent and the weeds here, but the reason I say that though is I think for the landlord and the tenant having these discussions, there's reasons for these discussions, have them. And that's why we wanted to do this today, because our situation is sometimes we put these things in the paper and you look at the numbers up there those jerks at the extension office, they're causing my cash rent to go up, or you got, I need to get more than that, so I mean, that's why we want these discussions to happen, and it's so critical that we talk about these things, and what's actually in the fall, one of my favorite seasons of the year when someone calls in and says, tell me about cash rent. It takes some time, but usually they end up being 20 or 30 minutes and we talk about all these different, and everybody's different. Everybody's got a different scenario. I mean, and Courtney, I don't know, is there any thoughts on like how we work with people that do the field borders? And like maybe they get conservation buffer strip and the farmer signs up for that and then they just keep the funds from that because and the landlord's not, I think it's nice when they let the landlord know you're doing that. And obviously the landlord might say, no, I don't want that there, but I've liked them because it allows you to get around the edge of the field. I've also kind of sometimes run that lawnmower around the edge of the field. You can't mow them all year, but you can mow one spot, and it almost seems like those deer, they walk, it's the path of least resistance. They're no different than us. They almost don't walk through the field. They walk around the edge of the field and might browse a little bit. They might browse on the easement. But I think it helps the deer damage is my argument. But Courtney, you got any thoughts on how that works with USDA payments and things for easements?
I don't. I think you can decide between the two of you however you want it to work, as long as you get it in, writing and have it clearly communicated.
Did you have a question?
Well, yeah, it brings up a question about fencing. If we want to put up a new fence, it used to be that the neighboring farmer would cover 50% of that. Is that still?
To my knowledge, the fence law is still that you look at your property line, you have to, if you both, if either one of you wants a fence, both parties have to put up a fence on the right half of that boundary. You may not have any, I may not have any livestock, but you want livestock. I have to put up half that fence, how I think it still is the state, yeah, fence law. I think we have a pub on that, but is that right, Courtney?
We do, and that is still supposed to be the law on that. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now I'm going to tell you,
50-50.
now in Putnam County, I have a lot of acreage, massive acreage, and if I wanted to fence that in, I'd probably just put the fence up myself because I would have to deal with about 10 different people. I'd be fighting forever. I'd probably just put the fence up on the one side but legally I could do that.
Yeah, I have an odd situation. I have an Amish neighbor beside me, and it happens to be that when he looks at the fence, the right half, which is his responsibility, is where my cattle are. And when I'm looking at my right half, it's where his horses are. Just happens to work out that way. And I asked him, I said, is there any chance we could trade just between you and me and take care of our own fence where our animals are? And he said, I don't want to do that because he said, way down the road when it's our kids, they might not remember that. It's okay. I mean, I understand that,
yeah.
But it's just an odd situation of the right half.
Well, at least you had the conversation.
Yeah.
Good for you. I mean, good for you for having the conversation.
Really good neighbor. Really good neighbor. Yeah. I mean, it's not a problem. But.
And again, that's something, maybe your comeback could have been like, maybe we could put that in writing and that either party could still, there could have been, not saying you messed up, I'm just saying.
No, it's okay.
Maybe you just kind of, I mean, that's a comeback that you have in that situation. Yeah.
Agreement of understanding attached to the deed.
Attached to the deed.
Yeah, an agreement of understanding the maintenance attached to the deed.
Oh, we have to have an attorney in the room.
Just delving up with leases, commercial property and farms and
yeah,
I get it.
No, okay, thank you for that. Yeah. So great discussion, great discussions to have. Again, please do not use the Purdue Ag Cash Rent Survey or the USDA numbers as this is what I should get. And I wanted to share that about the filling up a no-till field for a gal that's been farming your ground for many years, and all of a sudden, something. Don't fall for that because that it's not gonna probably be sustainable. I mean, yes, the dairy manure thing or and probably even the no, you might go several years with that before you really, but it's not. Sadly, some people look at things like, well, I'll be dead by the time it goes downhill. I don't care. Well, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. That's the difference of opinion, but that is some people's outlook. I try to look at things more longer term past me. And I would challenge you all to look at things that way. I think that's a better way to look at it, but that's, some of that has to do with conservation ethic and things like that too, land ethic, but anyway, those, just things to think about. Yeah.
I go back to what the two farmers said in communication. And as a landowner and manager, I've got an asset. And it's up to me to educate myself and how to take that asset. And if that farmer will help educate me and how to take care of that asset, because if it gets ran into the ground, then I've hurt my own self in the long run. So taking care of the asset on my end is my responsibility. And so it goes back to what you're saying, letting somebody come in one time, knowing what helps and hurts, and having those good conversations with the farmer, and how can I help you produce better off the land and make the land better long term. I've done a lot of things with our farmers that, may not have benefited me in the year, but benefited long term.
That's a really good attitude, but not everybody has it.
Yeah, and I understand that, but it's our responsibility to handle our asset. And we can run that asset into the ground, or we can build it up.
A couple of things too, I think, on the, Courtney's numbers, we saw some of the average and below average ground in the southern part of the state where it fell. It didn't fall as much on the below average and average, if I remember right. And some of the increases on the areas that did go up, it went up more on some of the lower quality ground. And there's kind of thought to be two reasons for that. As some of that, one of them could be the livestock factor, because some of that ground's hay and really suitable, better suited for hay and pasture. And with cattle prices the way they are, that's probably holding, putting the floor a little bit on some of those types of land. And of course, you got transitional land that somebody, they're gonna put a crop on it, but what they're really all about is deer hunting on it or whatever. And for those that are in the room, that's a couple of things I wanted to just throw out. For those in the room, I did want to share, give me just a second here. This is, if you search Purdue PAER, this is how you can find some of these, that report that she had. We also have, let me find this here. There's weird, I had all these pulled. So here's one where it's got the Indiana farmland value cash rent rates, and there's two little adcasts here that are really good to listen to and kind of summarize some of this data even deeper if you really want to get into that. But the one on the bottom here is rental rates. The one on the top is farmland values. I did give a listen to those. I think we did have Michael Langmeyer, which is the fellow on the right. We had him here in June for an Ag Outlook program. Unfortunately, not many people showed up. We did record it and posted it. We had quite a few people watch the recording. But anyway, that's something that I think would be a neat thing for you to check out too, and just know those are in existence there. Any other questions or comments? We kept you a little long here, sorry, but I think everybody's been engaged here pretty good, and I hope you got something out today.
Also want to make one last tie-in, but even with the hay production, I mean, it can be managed the same as the crops and stuff where it can easily be ran into the ground. I mean, I know multiple farmers, they'll push a fourth cutting in dry seasons and it hurts them the following hay production season. So another thing in seeding or putting on fertilizer, there's a lot of things that can still go into the hay production. They can be managed just as well as any other crop. So another consideration.
All right, well, thank you, Courtney. That was a great presentation. Very much appreciate that. For those of you online, remember, it's in the chat, I believe, but email me, mevans@purdue.edu. Andrea, I've already emailed you. And if anybody else would like that, it looks like we just got Ryan on right now. But if you got any questions, feel free to call. Kathryn and I are here. If it has to do more with the hay and things, Kathryn, I would say it's better to talk to, but yes.
Did we have this email to us?
Yeah, I can email it to you.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Courtney, you don't mind if I email them your PowerPoint, do you? I mean, otherwise, the people are in the room today, right? Yeah, because I emailed to other people, so yeah.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, thanks again for coming. We really appreciate it. We do try to do one of these every month. And so we don't have one set for next month yet, or do we have one? Yeah, we don't.
We haven't stepped out.
Yeah, we gotta get one set for next month. We've been doing a variety of topics, and like I said earlier, forestry would be a good one for us to do sometime in the winter time. I know you were talking about a forage one we talked about this morning, so we'll try, those will be some topics that I think we'll have coming up. But we try to do these on Tuesdays. It's not always a certain Tuesday, but we try to do them on Tuesdays. And we also partner with Keith here's on the Elkhart County Soil and Water Conservation District. We put their logo on there and stuff. It's actually an idea that I just got started last November. We met with SWCD counterparts here in the county and talked about what would be a good thing to do, and just doing like a breakfast briefing. We kind of changed the name a little bit because our dairy folks can't come at 8 o'clock usually. Today was focused more for tenants, but it's great that we have farmers here too. But we went ahead and did it more of a breakfast thing. Sometimes we do them 10 o'clock and in with lunch type of thing. But we try to do something every month. We did skip the fair's time, but we try to do something every month, usually on Tuesday, a little program topic, and try to keep it to an hour, but we're a little big. So thanks again for coming. We'll be here if you got questions. Again, thank you, Courtney, and appreciate everybody's help today.